Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janine Donnelly, Manager of Webinars for Tech Channel, and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You may ask a question at any time during the event by entering it into the Q&A panel. You may download a PDF version of the slide deck by clicking on the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources. You'll find that on the left side of your screen. And there you'll also find other valuable resources on today's topic, including the IDC report, Transparent Mainframe Consumption is the Crux of Modernization, as well as an infographic and ebook on mainframe consumption transparency. So be sure to check that out. Know that you can download those right from the platform without being disconnected from the webinar. Today's webinar, 5 must-have metrics for executing an optimal mainframe consumption-based pricing negotiation, is sponsored by Rocket Software. Our featured speaker today is Mark Perillo. Mark is a senior sales engineer at Rocket Software. Mark joined Rocket in 2019, but has been involved in mainframe support and solution engineering since the 80s. Mark's focus is on mainframe integration and exploitation to meet customer needs and requirements. It's his belief that understanding the mainframe is the best way to optimize it for your business. And with that, Mark, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Janine, and welcome everyone. Today we're going to go over a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, mainframe consumption, specifically the mainframe consumption insights for ZOS, product that Rocket Software sells and supports. Been in this space, this product was actually previously developed and written and marketed by RSD, which Rocket acquired, and that's when I joined Rocket Software. Okay, enough of a preface here. Moving on, we have an agenda. We're going to talk about mainframe consumption metrics and terms, the R4HA and the new tailored fit pricing that's now available from IBM. Then the customer needs and what we're calling the 5 must-have metrics demonstration, which is our attempt to show you, let me give you the actual agenda slide, to show you what we think are 5 KPIs within our product that give you a good understanding of your consumption on your system and how you can use this information to make informed decisions and deal with your cloud-based providers when it comes to licensing and cost. After the demo, we'll go over some basic topics in both consumption-based pricing, the R4H, and our product. And we'll open to questions, and then we'll have the next steps as well. So let's start off with an introduction to mainframe consumption. Now, mainframe costs are something we lived with in the mainframe since they first became available. Starting around the year 2000, we had a situation where people were buying larger machines than they actually needed. And when the economy sort of tanked in the early 2Ks, people were going back to IBM saying, I need a smaller machine. I don't want to pay for a big machine if I'm not going to use it. And that's what started mainframe subcapacity pricing. The intent was, if you had a large machine but were using a small portion of it, a lot of the products that you would be using would be consumption-based rather than full capacity of machine-based for charging. This came out with a slew of products and requirements. The SCRT, the subcapacity reporting tool, was developed. And we have some basic terms here I just want to review because they're going to come into play later. And I'm hoping that most of these terms are somewhat familiar to you. First and foremost is the R4H, also called the R4HA. Disregard the dollar sign on the slide, although it is kind of prophetic. It's all about a rolling 4-hour average that's used for estimating subcapacity pricing. This was done because a lot of workloads on the mainframe, depending upon their nature, can be quite spiky. And customers were worried about paying for spikes versus a smoothed out rolling average. The 4-hour average seemed like a pretty handy compromise across all the interested parties, so we went with that. The monthly charge just keeps an ongoing relationship with costs, so there are no surprises with IBM. It's been in place for a long time. The actual metric that's used for measuring the amount of mainframe consumption that's done is called an MSU, or million service units. Initially, they had a measuring unit called MIPS, millions of instructions per second. An MSU is roughly 8 MSUs to a MIP. So MIPS is usually a larger number, but they align very exactly for prices, etc. The last two terms on this slide, KPI and dashboard, are more specific to most products that deal with these metrics. We'll see it later. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It's basically a graphic presentation of different system properties that you're going to use to make determinations and decisions on your system. And a dashboard is just like almost like a web window, if you will. It's just a collection of KPIs. Okay, let's move forward. Talk a little bit about this rolling 4-hour average and tailored fit pricing. Okay. For over 20 years, the R4HA has been the standard for subcapacity pricing. It minimized the spikes, as I said previously. There may have been unpredictable workloads, but for the most part, capacity management became the responsibility of the business to keep costs down. Hardware caps and some soft caps that were implemented in software were introduced to kind of limit the peaks a little bit and smooth things out. A lot of people schedule jobs around peaks to minimize the cost per month, and they were able to make some significant cost savings by running through and doing all these exercises. There were a lot of rules. There were a lot of contractual agreements that were built upon this. A lot of software was in play to try and deal with the rolling 4-hour average. A lot of analytic software based on a lot of SaaS reporting was done, but all so that people could actually save money. That's what it was at the end of the day. Being in the mainframe environment, there's always a continued pressure to control costs. And the message was that if companies could control their R4HA and have it be reflected in their SCRT as their monthly licensing costs, they could save money. However, the one thing that the R4HA isn't is transparent. There are a lot of moving parts. Your mileage may vary month to month. It's very hard to predict your costs based on the R4HA if you have a very dynamic and ever-changing workload. As the mainframe is going forward and a lot more people are looking at cloud-based pricing and dealing with cloud-based providers, and as zCloud is becoming more of reality, the perception is the mainframe is not only expensive, but hard to gauge costs. IBM would like to see the mainframe as a strategic growth platform, but would like to have a more flexible model that shows lower costs, but also is easier to offer to the customers as a transparent solution and a little more in line with the billing from the other cloud environments. We basically pay for what you use. In addition, mainframe expertise is becoming more and more valuable, but more and more scarce, as a lot of the talent in this field is retiring, and a lot of the new products environments don't leverage a lot of the classical or legacy information. So a lot of the projecting workloads, a lot of understanding of workloads, even tuning, may not be as readily available as it was 10 or 20 years ago. So we have challenges. That's not new in mainframe. We always have challenges, but Seems like we're getting more challenges now than ever trying to fit into the current environment. And the customer sees that it's not a hybrid cloud anymore. Everything is connected, and all the workload patterns are constantly changing. We have to control costs. We have to save money. We have to deal with budgeting for our mainframe as well as our other environments so that we can understand our business needs going forward. And IBM is embracing a price transparency for zCloud workloads, including container support, that may fit better in a tailor-fit pricing type environment as opposed to the rolling 4-hour average. But to be really comfortable in this new space, we really have to understand our consumption and how that affects our decisions and how that's going to affect our costs going forward. So we have challenges. The tailor-fit pricing does deliver simplicity, transparency, and predictability of pricing. 2 years of your data, of your SMF records, are used to come up with a monthly MSU usage charge and to come up with a rate that's fair to both you and IBM and something that they can look at as both a revenue stream and an account management mechanism. And every year, there's a true up where all adjustments for credits and added charges are smoothed through. They can be added to the next year or settled at that time. There are considerations in tailor-fit pricing for different qualities of MSUs, if you will, but there is a separate charging mechanism or special considerations for non-production workloads, like test and development environments versus production. And this is somewhat consistent with most consumption-based pricing models. A caveat on this new environment is that it's really meant for just the newer IBM hardware, the IBM Z14s and now the Z15s and newer machines going forward. It's not for everyone. And it's also meant for companies, shops, customers that are growing, see a growth in the mainframe space, are investing in the mainframe, and plan on making it a strategic part of their business going forward. This is really for the people with a big investment in the mainframe, trying to grow it. And that's where all the cost benefits are kind of geared toward. So with all this information, what's a customer to do? The good news is we have tailor-fit pricing coming up, which gives us a much more transparent cost model for the mainframe. But you have to really understand your consumption to have a handle on where your costs are. And if you're not eligible for it, or if you're a shop that can really manage down to the MSU, how well you can smooth out your workloads with the rolling 4-hour average doesn't make sense for you. Or you're better off leveraging your skills to keep your monthly costs down with the more traditional R4HA model. The biggest thing I can think of to recommend to people is understand your environment. Understand the impacts of what you're doing. Understand what you're giving up by going to tailor-fit pricing and what you're gaining. No matter where you go, you need to understand your consumption at many levels. This shouldn't just be the knowledge of a few select people in your organization. Many levels, many stakeholders in your company have to understand your consumption. Even without the rolling 4-hour average, workload understanding is crucial. And as we move forward, more and more people have to share these insights and be involved in the decision-making process. Hopefully, everybody involved in the process should understand the process. And finally, if you're sharing insights and educating all the business stakeholders, you want to optimize your system intelligently. I talked about this with one of my colleagues just the other day, is that while you're optimizing your mainframe system, it may be growing in size. Now, it seems people are trying to maintain mainframe costs, but if your business is benefiting from your mainframe processing and if you're gaining a lot of financial leverage with your mainframe, a mainframe using more cycles or delivering more product may not necessarily be a bad thing. It all ties into your environment, your growth, and how your system is going to move forward. So you have choices. Well, the best way to understand your mainframe is to use a mainframe workload consumption tool. The benefits of using a newer product is that the older skill sets aren't really required anymore. The mainframe experts are diminishing. There are specific skills that go with traditional mainframe expertise. The newer tools that are all browser-centric, running on HTML5 platforms like Rocket's Consumption Insights for ZOS, are very intuitive, very straightforward, and are really geared toward the end user needing just minimal knowledge to get very meaningful results. We want to get this information to as many decision makers as possible in as many different formats as possible so the understanding is there. And we aim to consistently, reliably, dependably, and collaboratively come up with informed decisions based on a single version of the truth or a very strong underlying message based upon data. The benefits of realizing all these considerations moving forward for your business are that you can optimize your mainframe peak usage when and if it's applicable. You now have a foundation for not only understanding your system, but for transparent chargeback, meaningful summaries that you can use to prioritize and schedule your workloads, and high-level budget transparency. So moving forward, you can think about 1, 2, or 3 years down the road as opposed to 1, 2, or 3 months, because you're going to have enough data going forward to make these decisions, and enough different ways to look at it to make those decisions meaningful, as we'll see in the demo. Also, as a side effect of, or a result of understanding your consumption, you've got more data, more negotiation power with your software vendors and partners to talk about what the benefits may be for them to go to a consumption-based pricing model for using their software. Also, as we go forward and look at the actual products, we may see that the cost for these solutions based upon our current consumption aren't that significant, and that the vendor may be reluctant to go to consumption-based and may just go capacity-based because the actual product uses very few cycles but has a huge benefit. And one of my favorite points here is that we now have intuitive and straightforward tools to actually make these decisions. You don't have to take all this data and put it into a spreadsheet and start playing with the cells to get a meaningful result. As you'll see in the demo, once we get to a dashboard and deal with the KPIs, once we start drilling to data, one click here, another click there, refresh the screen, look at the scales. All the information is available. If you come up with a very intuitive or meaningful report or KPI that gives you something that's special, you can save it and share it with other people. Okay, now for this demo and for this topic for consumption-based pricing, I wanted to focus just on 5 KPIs that we could use to show how easy it is to drill into your company's SMF data and come up with meaningful, first of all, just overall consumption, which is key for dealing with tailored fit pricing, but then to drill down, to look at the actual analysis by the workload types as defined in WLM, Workload Manager on ZOS, looking at your actual application jobs so you can understand your corporate, your business lines and how they affect your consumption, who your big consumers are, and when they contribute to the consumption of the systems. The fourth is key. We're actually going to look at the program category or program products, the vendor products that are consuming resources on your system. And those usage profiles, what environments tend to increase the use of the products, how they're used throughout the day, how they're used as part of your business so you can make an informed decision on how valuable it is. And then ultimately the last metric we're going to look at, or the last KPI, is just looking at overall usage versus capacity, just so you can understand how well you fit into your current hardware environment and whether or not you may have to either increase your machine size or make some changes going forward based upon the workloads that we're seeing. And I have a slide that says demo. At this time, I'm going to switch to sharing the screen instead of doing the presentation. So bear with me. Do we have any questions out there, Janine, that you see?
No questions. All right. And we can see your graph now. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I am currently in my Chrome web browser, and I am contacting my Rocket Consumption Insights for ZOS server. It's currently running on a Linux virtual machine here at home. It's not a secure connection. It's on my local intranet. I'm in on a dashboard right now that I built specifically for the demo. The other dashboards are what's included with the product. These four dashboards are shown in light blue-green, as is my demo dashboard. And they're tailored for targeted stakeholders in your company. They can be modified to provide a good starting point for your consumption analysis for your stakeholders. But each dashboard basically has a group of KPIs that provide a view of the system built specifically for that role. So we're in our demo dashboard, and you'll see the very first KPI that I have is just an R4H cost 10 analysis, which we'll cover in a second. To actually understand these KPIs, the first thing I would like to do is explain how everything is mapped so that these KPIs and dashboard will actually make sense. To do that, I'm going to go over in the upper right here to this settings or little cog wheel, so we can see what we call application or mappings. Okay, I'm in the mapping sections here now, and you can see there's 8 different categories in mappings. We're going to deal with the first 5 in this demo. We'll be going over entries by workload type, entity, program category, CPC, application, and then there's additionally a report class family, transaction family, and KICS region. There's an offering with Rocket Consumer Insights for ZOS that has a KICS plugin, as well as with the SMF data that we'll be processing today. There's also a new feature coming out with RMF data. As I said, we'll be focusing on workload type, entity, program category of the CPC and application in this webinar. The workload type mapping, which we're starting off with initially, is using the workload manager categories that are defined in ZOS. We just have a very simple breakdown of teleprocessing, which includes KICS, MQ, and IMS. On our demo system, it's mostly all KICS, so think of it as a KICS workload. And everything that's not KICS is identified in WLM as batch. So a very straightforward mapping. We'll see it in that KPI that it's just to give us a handle on our 2 basic workloads on the system. Our next mapping is entity. That allows us to group the L parts together in our system, in our demo system, into meaningful categories that describe the system's environment. In our demo system, we define the L parts by lines of business. You can see in our demo system, we have commercial banking, personal banking, and financial banking. Now, the program category is what's going to be of particular interest to us in this webinar. It identifies the programs that are running and allows you to assign a category to it. You can group together multiple programs in a single reference category. And this can give you insights into the performance characteristics of the software when it's the most active. It may also provide crucial information when talking to a software vendor about cost and consumption. The resource profile of this software is readily available in KPIs that process the products and use this information. The software products in our demo include products from IBM, Broadcom CA, and Rocket Software, among others. Most vendors still use a capacity-based model for software costs, but more products may switch to consumption-based costs once or if tailored fit pricing becomes the standard. It's always worth having the conversation based upon what your consumption is on your systems and how much you use the products. As you see here, we have CA products from IBM. These are Rocket Software products, EOS Capture, EOS View, and TDS, IMS, or IBM products. Going to the CP scheme, you'll see that we actually have two central processes or complexes, or you each call them CACs, basically boxes, mapped that account for the system. They're identified with the last four digits of the serial number, and we have KPIs that reference this. For a quick insight just into machine size, you'll see it in one of our capacity KPIs, how we use the machine. And finally, the last one we'll cover here is application mapping. And this allows you to take all of your jobs running on your system and group them into logical applications. This gives you the opportunity for a very straightforward identification of all your business processes to responsible areas and can easily identify the consumption on your systems by each respective business area. This information is critical or crucial even if usage accounting, chargeback methods, or growth projections are needed to get back to the responsible parties. Okay, so this is how all the different SMF data is grouped together into categories so that our KPIs in our dashboards make sense. So we're going to go back to our demo dashboard. And now we can start understanding our data. Okay. To start with, I have a demo environment that's got a couple years worth of data. And I decided to start off with just a raw R4H analysis. The R4H is looking at the consumption per day. The actual analysis for the peaks is only when you get within the hours of the day for a very specific metric. So these KPIs are valid whether you're doing tailored fit or R4HA. It's all consumption. So this KPI shows the consumption every month for the last 13 months. Here's our time range, the last 13 months. And it's just solid consumption. This should match up very nicely with your MSU consumption for tailored fit pricing for the last 13 months. You can quickly glance at any month just by mousing over that monthly summary bar and seeing the value. We can quickly determine here that our highest consumption on our system was in March. Okay. And before that, our highest consumption was in October. So almost 407,000 MSUs here, 417,019 MSUs there. It's a nice monthly view, quick snapshot, what a lot of the senior business people may want to see. But we can also look at the daily consumption. Just a couple of clicks, we can go to time range. Now for a day, we're just going to pick a day in the previous month. We'll just go for the highest billed MSU. Because we're using the R4H, it's going to be the day when we hit the peak, and we'll see the hour. Just look at the raw data, peak is 16,882 MSUs. on July 27th. Now, if we go back and just look at the last 30 days by day, let's go back previous month instead, just for a better view. The actual peak day with the most consumption was on July 30th. The 27th is real close. And with the metric signed up for, we're going to go back to that as our day of record for consumption. Well, at this point, I'd like to look at the profile daily. So let's start looking at some trends. And the first thing to do with the trends is kind of align with the calendar a little bit. Our lowest consumption days are Sunday and Monday. So July 11th was a Sunday, July 12th is a Monday. July 4th was actually a holiday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on our systems are the biggest consumption days. Usually Tuesday is the peak. Sometimes Thursday ends up edging out Thursdays. But definitely our peak activity, our peak consumption. Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays have lower utilization. Saturdays are low, but not as low as Sundays and Mondays. And that's because a lot of batch processing is done here. The highest daily MSU was on July 30th. The R4H peak day was the 27th. We saw that by picking one of the metrics. We can validate the R4H again just because we're looking at consumption by coming in here, and we'll just say highest R4H of the previous month. That gives us a day, that gives us a consumption. But this shows how that day played out. So we saw our peak was actually at noon. Once we are fixed on tailored fit pricing, this is no longer as important. This also means that there are fewer opportunities for controlling costs because the peaks really don't matter. It's also true for other ways of balancing and scheduling workloads to reduce activities, or even hardware or software caps. They may not be practical with tailored fit pricing because constraining workloads will not necessarily save you money. If the jobs take longer, as long as they end up consuming the same amount of resources, it's really not going to matter. Ultimately, the cost of your workload is going to be based upon the consumption. This means understanding your consumption matters more now than ever. Okay, I'm going to go back to the last 13 months and just start drilling down a little differently. So let's look at that. So there's the last 13 months by month. Now looking at the big picture, it might be more important for us to analyze by entity how many resources our businesses are actually using. In our demo system, you can see that personal banking is the largest user of resources on our system. In our peak in March, actually let's go back to the last 13 months. Okay. Our peak in March, we see 210,000 MSUs are attributed to that system. It's not a huge workload comparatively. Commercial banking is not far behind it. Our smallest workload is actually the financial banking. A more consistent workload, but doesn't get anywhere near as large as the other two. Now, these values could be contributors to a usage profile or even be used by chargeback if you're trying to come up with meaningful metrics for your system utilization on the mainframe. So a very simple view just by your lines of business. We can go a little further and look at a Syslex analysis, which are groups of LPARs together on a ZOS system that share resources to a large extent, and a lot of operations, a lot of performance metrics are measured by Syslex. We can see that we have 3 Syslexes on our system. By naming 2 of them are production, SysPRX1 is by and large our largest system. SysPRX2 is significantly smaller, but the test Syslex is the smallest user of resources by far. Now, I just want to mention with the tailored fit pricing, this provision allows for some considerations for this test Syslex. So that if it has unanticipated consumption or if it becomes a large consumer of resources, those are actually charged a little differently. Now, one of the things I wanted to note here, just for an exercise going forward, is this test Syslex, TST1, in July used roughly 38,820 MSUs. So I want to show you a way that we can cross-reference some of this information when we start looking at consumption in other ways. Back to analyze, if we look at our analysis by LPAR, you'll see there are a lot of LPARs in the system, and this may not be the best way to view the data. However, there is something here that's kind of neat. If you look at the names, our prod LPARs tend to be named prod, our test LPARs tend to be named test. In our tool, if we exclude all the production LPARs, and assuming that our naming standards are somewhat consistent, so only the test LPARs are left. And we look at our July utilization. If we add up A-Test 0's MSUs, A-Test 1's MSUs, and A-Test 2's MSUs, I'm not going to do the math here, but the total comes out to 38,819. We'd estimated 38,820 MSUs for the actual Syslex. The one MSU is probably just a little Syslex overhead. So these metrics do agree with each other. If you cross-reference the machines, the LPARs, the Syslexes, the data does chill. It's not wildly unpredictable. It's consistent. We also had views just by the CPCs itself. You'll see we had the 2 boxes. The workload is somewhat evenly distributed across the 2, although the B001 through 3 box has a little bit more of the MSUs versus the 2 through 7. So that's about it for just the main consumption. From here down, we're going to be breaking it down by other entities. I'm sorry, do we have any questions? I'm hearing some.
No questions coming in yet.
Okay, good. I must have just been a quick here. Okay, I'm going to move forward. And the next KPI that we're going to look at, let me just minimize the view and discard my changes. So we're back to our view. We're going to do an R4H analysis by workload type. Now, remember before we talked about our workload types, we basically had TP or teleprocessing and batch. There is a little bit of gray on here, another workload that we didn't map for our purposes. Some of the system overhead, some of it is actually DB2. That doesn't fall into either category. So we're going to end up with 3 different insights into our consumption, starting with the workload type. And the tailored fit pricing is meant to just make this more transparent. So we'll see moving forward. Once again, this monthly view should pretty much jive with your monthly consumption. It's just broken down by different categories. If we add everything up, we get the same numbers that we had in the capping. So last 13 months, using WM workloads, most of our consumption can be attributed to batch. Consistently every month, the batch workload is the largest. Cell processing is a large factor, but it's not the biggest. Looking at total consumption, that's our biggest workload. Any tuning, optimization, or reduction in batch processes may be our most effective method to lower our costs. Tuning in other environments will also give us a payback, but you may want to focus on our largest workload. So we have the raw monthly totals here, but to really understand these workloads, we have to look at the daily processing and the weekly processing to really have it make sense. So to start off with, I'm going to go back into the time range and go to the previous month. The scale goes automatically to day. Once again, July 2nd falls on a Friday here. We can see our teleprocessing environment varies substantially from weekends to during the week. And consumption is very much concerned on Tuesdays through Fridays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, across the days of the month. Our heaviest online days tend to be Tuesday or Thursday. Tuesday being the busiest day of the week. Sunday is the lightest day of the week. However, Monday has the lightest batch workload of the week, and Sunday has the lowest teleprocessing workload of the week. Notice that the 4th of July acted like a weekend day. Holidays may end up having their own files if we look further on the system views. Now, quick view. We'll stay in here. Go back to time range. Sorry about that. You mean the turn on filters. Going back to the time range, we go back to the previous month. And we look at just a preset for the highest day. And we'll see around July 27th. Okay, so 8,400 MSUs worth of batch, 7,400 MSUs worth of teleprocessing. If you look at the actual hours within the day, you can actually see on a given day how the utilization changes for all your different products or for your different WLM workload classes. So batch is very heavy between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., picks up again at around 9 a.m. Batch is leaned way out from 8 a.m. to, say, 6 p.m. Starts kicking up again at 6 to make room for the online process. So I will end my screen share. Go back to slides. We're real low on time. Does that include questions? I'm sorry, Janine. I'm back to you.
Hey, that's okay. Yeah, we're kind of running up against the clock. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and let our attendees know that, I think it's right here. That's me, Mark, moving your slides.
Okay.
This is your opportunity. If you click on that live link, you can actually book a consultation. And actually, if you click on it, it'll be available to you following the webinar. I know you might find that useful, so please take advantage of that. And then likewise, on this slide, you might want to click on that link in the blue box and join the forum. Join the Rocket community, get more information on all things Rocket. And with time running out, Mark, I think what we'll do is we have all the questions, and we will, if you because we couldn't address them, we'll be sure that you get an answer to your questions via email.
Oh, absolutely.
And otherwise, thank you so much, Mark. I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And I especially want to thank Mark for sharing his expertise with us today. Later this week, watch for a follow-up email. It will contain a link to the recording of today's webinar. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.